everyone, and welcome to Inspire Me Monday. I'm Allison Cope, and I'm your hostess for today. And today we're going to be doing some fun background additions. I don't know about you, but I actually dream about crafting. I dream about ideas and what I'm going to teach next. And there was a pattern that was stuck in my head, and it had all these kind of lines in the background to try and bump up the images that were offset to the side. And so I thought, oh, why don't we talk about making neat things in your backgrounds to set off those awesome stamps that you have in your stash. I've made a couple of samples using some of our newly released clear stamps. For my first example, I used a die cut that I had sitting around, just hanging around on my desk. And I masked off the edges and then stamped the little peony flower from our new set, Soothing Sympathy. And I stamped the greeting here from our other new stamp set called Then I took my pen, and literally it was just a black pen that I had, and drew in some parallel lines using a ruler, and I added some Brusho because this is a piece of watercolor paper, so I thought, I'll just use something water-based. So I pulled out my Brusho and wet all the area around all of my stamped images and let my Brusho do all the color work, which is great. Super fun. And then I thought, okay, well, let's do this on a bigger scale. So I die cut another piece of watercolor paper, and I did exactly the same thing, except for this time I pulled in my Ranger Distress inks and had fun. It's a little muddy, it's not my favorite, and when I took the tape off from masking, it tore. I was so disappointed, but it's okay. I think what I'll do is I'll cut off the bottom and somehow use it in the card at the end to show you guys what you can do with your mess ups. All right, and I did the same thing. This is, because it's water-based, this was the only thing that I could find to use with my water-based medium. So we're going to try this one more time. I've stamped all of the blooms from our gorgeous new Soothing Sympathy set, plus the sentiment there. And this time I have stamped it on Copic Express It paper, and we're going to use some Copics to color. So I think what we'll do is we'll do our coloring first, and then we'll go in and add our linear background. So another thing before we get started coloring, make sure that you know what kind of medium you're going to be using. So if I bring back my two examples, I used a water-based medium to color these in. So I had to use an ink that was appropriate to use with water and water-based inks. So for these two, I actually used a VersaFine Black Onyx ink to stamp. But because I know I'm going to color with Copics, I've pulled in my Memento. So make sure you kind of know ahead of time how you're going to color in your background, and make sure you use the proper inks. So let's color our background in here. I have grabbed a B00, a YG11, and a V000. You don't have to be super exact with this. If your markers are nice and juicy, all the better. We're just going to color in and around all of our blooms. We actually want to leave our lovely blooms as they're white and uncolored images. So I tried to pick some colors that would blend appropriately. So make sure that you test on a scrap piece of the same kind of paper, and make sure that your colors, when blended, don't make mud. Guess I've done that. Absolutely. All right, so I'm going to speed up the coloring, I'll add a little music, and then we'll work on our background. Enjoy! Alright, so I've got down my base color. I went over my colors a few times just to intensify them a little bit and also to blend the junctions of them as well. So now let's add a little bit of texture before we go and do more background. So I've moved our little piece off to the side for the moment, and I have some Copic blending solution just in a mini mister. Usually it's labeled, but of course as it drips down the bottle, it tends to disappear, my writing there. I'm just going to, just a couple of spritzes on this cloth here that I keep specifically at my desk for this purpose. I'm going to bring in our piece, and I'm going to just take that corner, I folded it under, and I'm just going to apply that damp cloth to our piece. Now, see if I can bring this in closer to the camera here. Not sure if you can see this, but you see the little speckles? Yeah, we've actually pushed some of the ink towards the back of the paper by applying that wet surface. So I'm going to continue to do that around the back of my piece here. And then when I'm happy, then I'll show you one more technique to add a little bit more interest. Try applying different weaves of fabric to your pieces too. They will give you different textures and voids. Some colors show this technique better than others based on their intensity. If you're going to color in your images, you would want to do your background first, do this technique, and then color your images in, because if you were to do this while coloring, you're actually going to take out whatever you have done on all your hard work in coloring. So make sure you do this technique in the background, color your background first, then you can add all your interest. Now, another way to do this is actually to take your mini mister and do exactly the same thing, and just, I've got it off camera here, and I'm just going to mist it ever so slightly, and it too will give you a dotty spotted background as well. Maybe not as mini as some of these dots that we applied, but it will give you an effect as well. I'm going to do this a few more times with my cloth, then we'll work on our lines. So I'm not 100% happy, and I want to experiment some more, so I'm just going to bring in a stencil from Tim Holtz. This one just happens to be bubbles. I've brought my mister back in, and I think we're going to do this via cloth. So I'm going to dampen my cloth, and we're going to just press through that stencil. You could, and if you don't have any stencils, you can make your own. Just cut all kinds of funky shapes or use some dies to make your own stencil. Yeah, this is all about experimentation. And see what you come up with at the end, because you'd never know. There we go. So we got some action happening there. Like I said before, it all depends on the saturation of your cloth. The more blending solution you have in there, the more it's going to work into that ink and push it down into the paper. So have fun. There we go. We got some more spots there too. Now you could also take your Copic markers and color in through the stencil as well for your background, just making sure that you don't color on your images, but that would be kind of cool too. All right, on to our background here. So I have a number of thicknesses of Copic multi-liner. They are listed on the ends. I have in my hand a 0.5 and a 0.5. This is really super fine. And I have a couple more in between. We've got a 0.25 as well. So I think we'll use the 0.25. And you're going to need a see-through ruler for this part and a scrap of paper. I'm going to bring in my scrap of paper here. And I'm going to, this has a little bit, actually let's put a little bit more, just temporary adhesive on the back here just to hold it in place. We don't want it to move. And what you need to decide now is what kind of angle you're going to add your lines at. You can choose any angle. You can go straight up and down. You can go on the diagonal. You can go side to side. It's completely up to you. I am going to pick an angle like this, let's say. So the first thing to do is you need a starter line. So making sure, I'm actually going to trace, hang on one second. I'm going to trace the outline of my circle here just so I can see it a little better against the white. And you got to decide whether you're going to touch your images or not touch your images. It's completely up to you. Next, sorry, I've got impeding things here. Next, you're going to use the lines that are already on your ruler, and this side has centimeters, and the millimeter marks are much, they're not as tall as the 1/16 of an inch lines on this one, so I'm going to use this side of my ruler. And what you're going to do is you're going to take all of those lines and you're going to line them up with the line that you've just drawn. And that's how you make sure that they all get going in the same direction and are the same width apart. You can be, let your pen kind of do the marks. If it fades off, let it fade off. Speed this up, and then I'll point out a few things at the end here as we go. So as you get into a more concentratedly stamped area, it's in your best interest, and this is why you need the scrap paper in the background, is to extend those lines past your image. It gives you something to line up with on those marks on your ruler when you only are getting a couple of itty-bitty lines. There's not enough information there to line it up. So use that scrap paper, extend those marks, and use them to get you farther on down that image. Just another tip as you're doing this. I hope you check out the Power Poppy blog for more inspiration. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you have fun creating.